So I'd first like to welcome everyone. Thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. My name is Zane Westmoreland, and with me on the call today is David Murdoch.
Good afternoon.
We're two founders at Acadiate, and we're here today to share with you some of the top trends that we're seeing affecting career fairs and graduate employability. This comes from a lot of the work we've done over the last 10 years, which I'll give you a little bit more insight into, and is really meant to be really showing you some of the observations we're making within the field of career fairs and graduate employability, and to help maybe demonstrate some of the ways that you can take advantage of some of these trends and some of the things that we're seeing schools do. So a little bit of our agenda today is first to give you a bit of an introduction to ourselves and the topic. And then we'll go over the five trends and their impacts. We'll do a recap and we'll save 5 minutes at the end in case there's any questions. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please do feel free to either use the chat, or if you'd like, you can also jump in by unmuting and asking away. So we'd encourage it to be interactive if possible, but if you just want to kind of hear it out and save it till the end, we're good with that as well. So we are from Acadiate. If you've never heard of us before, we're an organization that has been around for 10 years now. In our early days, we were heavily focused on the digital marketing of students and the way students showcase themselves online. And over the last 3 years, we've been used far more heavily in the online event building and community building space. So we've been able to kind of see the shifts and how students, employers, academics have been shifting over the last 10 years. And we've been able to put those together between myself and David to kind of give you these trends that we're seeing emerging and the impacts that they are having on career fairs and the broader graduate employability of students. We're now working with over 300 institutions, and we've seen over 3 million students go through the platform. So we are basing this on a lot of what we're seeing and the insights we've garnered from that. So to get right into it, the very first trend that we are noticing heavily is the normalization of remote work and remote collaboration. And we're seeing this not only within the academic sphere, but also heavily, obviously, within the employer sphere. And we like to kind of see that the pandemic has really pushed a lot of these technologies forward 5 to 10 years of where they would have been otherwise. But it also has shifted a lot of the rules of engagement for students around their employability. So some of the impacts we're seeing on graduate employability is that because of remote opportunities, employers are now hiring far outside of their geographical region. So we're seeing employers from Quebec, from BC, from Alberta, no longer have to stay strictly local. So they are widening the scope of what they're recruiting. So that present students with way more opportunities, but there's also now increased competition. So instead of just competing against, if you're in BC universities, you're now competing against individuals from Ontario, from Quebec, from Alberta, and the other provinces, and sometimes even from schools in the US. So that means that now more than ever, the top jobs are that much more competitive and require students to have that much more knowledge in what they're doing online. So we've seen that the ability to show things like conscientiousness, self-awareness, self-motivation, and digital literacy are even more important now, because those are all, from what employers have told us, kind of the core traits that they're looking for in a successful remote worker, or someone that they're able to trust to do their work remotely. And that we're also seeing that their ability for students to show evidence of success in remote learning, and specifically remote collaboration from their time in university, is also a huge plus for employers while recruiting. And there's ways to show that, which we'll go about explaining a little bit more as the presentation goes on. The impact on career fairs is a couple-fold. First is we're seeing career centers actually now have an opportunity to really expand their employer pool. You're no longer restricted to individuals that can physically make it to campus. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of career fairs that have a more diverse grouping of employers. We're seeing a lot more American recruitment in Canada, but also more foreign recruitment. And we're seeing it's because of these walls are coming down because of the possibility of remote work. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. Also, some recruitment teams we've also seen have gone fully online. And for those groups, we're seeing that online career fairs are becoming more essential to having their participation. There's a lot of positives, and there's always two sides to the coin. Some people can't wait to get back in person, but there's also a lot of recruiters that love the efficiency of being able to put aside 2 hours and attend a career fair and have the rest of the other 6 hours of the day to get through other work. So we're seeing that there is some teams that are fully online, and if you do have an in-person option, they won't be as excited to attend. But if you have a hybrid option or you do have an availability of an online option, they will want to be there. The other thing we're seeing with online career fairs is that you want to bring in more student collaboration into your event. And that means maybe involving students in marketing, setting up things like Discord through students, having academic clubs host workshops. We see that the more interactivity and collaboration you have with other groups that may be outside the Career Center, the more those groups actually share with their peers and the higher the engagement you get from the overall event. So at a high level, that's the first trend that we are noticing. The second trend we're seeing is because of the much stronger focuses and emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion, it is having effects on graduate employability, but also in the way that career fairs are run. So for graduate employability, we are seeing that first and foremost, students that understand diversity and inclusion are actually able to now position it as a strength in their marketing, and employers see that as a positive thing. The second piece to this is something we actually noticed from our background about 10 years ago when we first got started. A lot of students were actually being encouraged, if they were from a visible minority, to shield that or to not let employers see that until they got to the interview stage. Things like changing names to more English names. We've seen a shift in that over the last 10 years now, to where students are actually encouraged now to showcase their true selves, their unique stories, their genuine personality, and that there is less of a concern for whether or not they would be adversely or negatively impacted by doing that. So that's a great thing that we are seeing among students. And we are seeing that when you give students the opportunity to showcase themselves in this way, they are taking full advantage of it. The impact on career fairs is employers are now showing students more of their practices and policies to ensure that they do have inclusive and a diverse workplace. And it's becoming an important part for students to be able to see that there are policies and practices in place to create a very competent working environment for themselves. The other piece to this is, one second here. Online career fairs are actually making it much easier for events to promote diversity and inclusion. So what that means is we are seeing a lot of very focused career fairs, for example, women in engineering or STEM-based fields, where you can actually have career fairs that would have been maybe too difficult to create at an in-person for the number of students that you have and the number of the employers that you have, but are easily created in the online sphere. So it's something that you can really leverage online to make it much easier to start paying closer attention to the diversity and the inclusion that you want among students, and to have more events in that area.
Right, and we're actually with some of our client universities where we've run a lot of events where in the case of career fairs, they might be going into their third or fourth one with us. And what we're actually seeing with a number of these schools as they become more familiar with career fairs, but also our platform, because it's malleable, we're seeing what we call kind of a compression, not trying to focus on one big career fair for the entire school for the entire year. They're pushing it down and stretching it out. They're actually creating a lot smaller career fairs that are highly focused and targeted. And the beauty of that, as Zane shows here with women in STEM as an example, it allows the employers to be very focused on their messaging for the school to be attracting in students from that particular group, but also the employers to be focusing on them in a special way. And we're actually seeing much higher levels of engagement because the students are recognizing that they're getting information and relationships that they don't ordinarily get from a general career fair. And therefore, you see much greater engagement, and employers are more satisfied because they can be more focused in their messaging. So that's one of the trends we're seeing in online career fairs is spreading them out, having more frequent ones, but more targeted ones for very particular groups.
The third trend we're seeing is the increased digitization. And this has several effects. At first one we're going to cover in trend 3 is its downsides. So we are seeing students right now are perhaps one of the most heavily distracted students. They've got social media, digital entertainment like Netflix and YouTube. They've got gaming, they've got dating apps, and all these things we're seeing actually are taking up a lot of student time, but they're also shifting student behaviors. And the first way we are seeing that is on their impact in their ability to communicate one-to-one with recruiters and other individuals. They're feeling less comfortable and more intimidated by those conversations. So that is something we're noticing heavily, that, you know, in years past, it would be easier to get someone on a face-to-face call. They were used to having face-to-face interaction. Now we're seeing a lot of students are more likely, even if they go into a Zoom call, to rely on chat. And they feel really afraid to kind of turn their camera on or to unmute their mic. And that's more of a behavioral thing we're seeing, is that a lot of these students, their method of communication on the social networks that they use is far more driven by text-based solutions. So that's something to keep in mind as you do things for students, is to understand that kind of norm. And there are ways that you can incorporate technologies to help break that down and help them. The other thing we're seeing is that most students are digital consumers versus digital creators. And what we mean there is that most students are more taking in lots and lots of information rather than using these digital tools to create things. And what that means is, for a lot of them, they're not very effective at doing things that help showcase themselves effectively online. Things like creating digital portfolios or creating websites or getting involved at creating their own social media channels and things like that. So it's something that we are paying very close attention to. And one of the things we try to work with schools with is helping students understand that to create value for yourself online, you do have to move more into this creation space. And you have to get more comfortable with that rather than being digital consumers all the time. And we are seeing that is a result a lot of their kind of analysis paralysis. They're seeing so much incredible work out there, and they feel maybe their work isn't as good. So they don't get into it at all without realizing that, you know, you have to start somewhere. And that's how you get better, is through iteration over time. So that's one of the things we are noticing. The impact this is having on career fairs is that we're seeing now that because these students have so much going on, their attention spans tend to be a little bit less, that it's important now that the events take up as much time as needed to provide the student with the core value. So we are noticing that shorter events that are 1 to 2 hours are driving far better numbers than extended events that are 3 hours plus. And this goes to David's point where before, early on in the pandemic, we were seeing schools that would have kind of a more general career fair and they'd invite everybody in. Now we're seeing that they will break that down into steps. So on one day, they will focus on, you know, business. Another night they'll focus on arts. Another night they'll focus maybe on government jobs. And they're finding that these targeted but shorter events are becoming much more successful, and they're able to actually keep students involved and engaged throughout the process. The other thing we're noticing is that students need a lot of guidance in how to succeed at an online career fair. And this is one of the things we noticed is that when you go to an in-person career fair, you can look around and you can see what other students are doing. You can see how they're going up to employers, engaging them. In the online world, you don't have that benefit. You kind of work in a silo. So a lot of these students are unsure, what does it mean to be successful? How am I supposed to engage with these employers? When I drop into a call with an employer, what do I do? So we're seeing that there are needs for more support around that, around helping them have a clearer expectation of what they need to do once they get to that career fair. How do you find success? How do you engage the employers? And we're seeing that workshops are really meaningful roles that career centers can play as a support mechanism for that.
Right. And also, when we engage to create a career fair with an organizer, we actually encourage you to have, let's say, an opening speaker or an event just before you open the doors for the students to come in. Some have had motivational speakers. Other ones have a workshop run by career services to give guidance to students of how to start conversations with employers. A lot of things that you would think are fairly basic and common sense, but not really, that students actually appreciate that type of, very basic tactical advice of how to engage employers and what employers are looking for. So think of when you're organizing a career fair, to have it much more than just a gallery of companies or exhibit hall, but try and accessorize it with some events where it could be advice or resources from career services.
Yeah. And that brings us to our fourth trend, which is actually the upside of digitization. We are seeing that students now today have access to better and more effective digital tools than ever before. They now have tools like LinkedIn where they can have access to professionals from just about any company within seconds. And we're seeing that a lot of students aren't taking advantage of these tools. And it goes back to our point before, a lot of them are intimidated or are not sure how to effectively use these tools for their career marketing. We notice even on our own platform that students can actually triple their employability in a couple hours just by building a showcase that goes beyond a resume cover letter and that can show things like personality. So the incredible and the exciting information is that the tools are there. Huge gains can be made. It's just about educating students on how to properly leverage these tools and how to effectively add them to their toolkit for their own employability. The thing for career fairs is you also have unprecedented access to technology. And one of the things that we've seen that makes this really useful is that you can actually incorporate familiar online spaces and technologies. And that actually makes it far more likely to engage students. And what we mean by that is, let's say you have a career fair. We know now that a lot of students are on the chat platform Discord. So if you incorporate things like Discord into your career fair in a meaningful way, students are comfortable with that technology, they understand how it works, and they're more likely to engage because you're engaging them in the way that they're used to be engaging. This is another way of breaking down the barriers. So we have seen employers will use this in some of their recruitment strategies, that they will use Discord or other chat-based technologies as the first layer of interaction with a student. And then from there, they will build a student into audio or a video chat. And it's to help kind of break down these barriers of comfort for students. But as an event organizer, you want to be thinking about how you can meet students where they are in their technology and help them bridge the gap from there.
Right, because we do a lot of open houses for universities with hundreds of thousands of students. So recruiters, university recruiters actually really like Discord. And the beauty of Discord is it allows for a greater fidelity of exchanges and development of a relationship, as they call it, from chat to conversation to a web call. So that's the beauty of using these other technologies that these students are very comfortable with and is ubiquitous. 99% of your students actually have a Discord account. So think of how you can leverage these technologies within a career fair, because you can dramatically improve engagement that way.
We're also seeing much higher engagement in online career fairs, especially outside of the live hours. So one of the important things that we have noticed is early on in the pandemic, we looked at online career fairs as a one-to-one replacement of a in-person career fair. But we quickly found that that was the wrong way to look at it. There's certain strengths that online has that in-person doesn't, and there's certain things about in-person that online just can't match. So it's about understanding the way that online is used, and we are seeing that from students' point of view, they are using it as a resource heavily, and we're seeing 5x the engagement outside of career fair hours. So students are actually going there to learn about companies, see what they're all about, and as much as they have a live day where they can chat interactively with them, they're more likely to actually engage with those employers outside of those hours. So it's a very interesting kind of shift in the dynamic, but it's better understanding that not to look at an online fair with the same metrics or the same measures of success as you would an in-person. So a very important kind of differentiation that we're seeing, and something for you to consider. And then it's also one of the reasons why, as a platform, all of our events actually run for a 90-day window, or have up to 90 days that you can run the event for.
It also means, as an employer, you need to be careful of investing in the right marketing materials and invest a proper amount of time in making sure your booth projects your brand, projects the right message, is engaging students the right way, and has the right material, which is why it's helpful to have multiple events where you can change up that material depending on the demographics of what students are coming to that particular event. But because we're seeing 5 times more students coming outside of the live hours, they're using it as a resource to make decisions of who to approach and who to focus on for employment. And it's a great way to get your message out. So think about how you're managing that, because it's very powerful.
And the last trend that we are seeing is that there is a heavily increasing need for student mental wellness and mental health supports. And we're seeing that, the pandemic has created one of the most socially isolated cohorts of students. There's a lot of surveys out there. The vast majority of them show that over 80% of students are reporting negative mental health impacts from the different pandemic restrictions and responses. And one of the things we are seeing is, on top of all of the stresses they're going through already, getting a job is actually a major stressor as well. So many students actually push it back and procrastinate, often until after graduation, until they have to start getting ready for the job market. So this is actually something where we see career fairs can play a very valuable a very valuable role. And one of the key things is to think about providing students with more mental health and wellness support throughout your event. As we mentioned earlier, one of the things is about helping them better understand how to succeed in the event. But also, we've seen some career fairs that have, how to emotionally manage the job search process, how to handle rejection that is going to come with finding a job, how to prepare them for all these things. We've noticed that a lot of career fairs were skipped or postponed, because they couldn't be there in person. We're seeing that for a lot of students, this is actually, it hurt them a lot of ways, because they were unable to have that first kind of interaction with a world outside of the academic environment. And a lot of the students we talked to say that the career fairs they attended to was actually the first true view into the reality that I have to start preparing for this job market. So we're seeing that because a lot of these were skipped, a lot of these students are a little bit more behind in getting prepared for the job market. And a very simple and easy way to rectify this is to create more of these opportunities for students, even if they're smaller. They don't have to be as large, but to get them their foot wet with the idea of interacting with employers. Some are even doing it as early as in the fall, right, as a way of just kind of icebreakers, bringing in alumni to get them used to having these conversations. So there's ways that you can stage it. But one of the things we're seeing is that you do want to ensure you keep your events going, because they are important touch points for these students, as they deal with kind of the mental wellness of their education. So I know we're coming up to the time, but I just want to go through a quick recap of the different items. And you can see these items are actually larger trends that we're seeing across academia, and they all have their own unique impacts on both graduate employability and career fairs. And one of the key takeaways we hope that you take from this is that, for a lot of these students, they really do rely on these career fairs, to help them become more comfortable with the idea of what they're going to be doing after school, whether it's just being able to make a simple connection with employers, or it's just to become more comfortable in the online space, because a lot of these students will be going through a fully online recruitment process where they will be doing their applications and interviews, and often even their jobs in a remote capacity. So with that said, would love to open it up to any questions anybody has at this time.